The hammer fell against the red-hot steel with a rhythm that had long since stopped being conscious thought. Strike, turn, strike again. The metal sang its high, sharp protest sparks, scattering across the dirt floor of the forge like dying stars. Elijah Carver worked in the near darkness, the only light coming from the glowing mouth of his furnace and the single oil lamp hanging from a beam overhead. The lamp swung slightly in the night breeze that found its way through the gaps in the rough plank walls, making shadows dance and twist across his face. He was 37 years old, though the mirror, when he bothered to look, showed a man who could have been 50. His hair, once dark brown, now hung long and unkempt past his shoulders, streaked with premature gray. A wild beard covered the lower half of his face, hiding a jaw that had once been clean and military sharp. His eyes, pale gray-blue like winter ice, held a permanent weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. Those eyes had seen things, they remembered things, and sometimes, late at night when the work was done and the silence pressed in too close, those things came back with a clarity that made his hands shake. The shaking. That was why he worked at night. In the daylight, when the town was awake, and people might see his hands trembled unless they were gripping something. The hammer. The tongs, the reins of his horse. It had been this way for 5 years now, ever since he walked away from Fort Apache in the middle of a January snowstorm, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a sin so heavy it bent his spine. Strike, turn, strike. The hunting knife he was making slowly took shape, the blade emerging from the formless bar of iron through violence and heat. He had found in these 5 years of wandering that he was good at this work. There was an honesty to it. You heated metal until it glowed the color of sunset. You hit it until it took the shape you wanted. You plunged it into water, and the transformation was complete. Simple, direct. Unlike the war where you pulled a trigger from 300 yards away and watched through a scope as a man you had never met crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The door to the forge creaked open. Eli did not look up. He knew who it was by the heavy footfalls and the jingle of spurs. Sheriff Tom Brennan was 50 years old, thick around the middle, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had learned long ago not to show too much. He stood in the doorway for a moment, letting his vision adjust to the dim interior, then walked over to stand near the anvil. He did not speak. He knew better than to interrupt Eli mid-strike. Instead, he waited, watching the younger man work with the patient stillness of someone who understood that some men needed time to surface from wherever their minds had gone. Eli finished the heating set, the blade aside to cool, and only then looked up. "Sheriff," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. He did not talk much these days. "Eli," Brennan replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper, unfolding it carefully. "Got an order for you. Town council wants 30 sets of shackles and cuffs. Heavy duty. Need them in 2 weeks." Eli stared at the paper without taking it. "What for?" Brennan's mouth tightened. Territorial governor issued a directive. All Apache north of the Gila River are to be relocated to the reservation at San Carlos by the end of October. That's 6 weeks from now. The town needs to be ready to process them when the Army brings them through. Something cold settled in Eli's gut. Process them. Chain them, load them on wagons, send them south. You know how it works. Brennan's voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes said something else. They said he did not like this any more than Eli did, but that liking or not liking was irrelevant. Orders were orders. Eli looked at the paper, then at the half-finished knife on his anvil. A weapon designed to kill. Shackles designed to bind. The products of his forge. "I'll have them ready," he said quietly. Brennan nodded, started to turn, then paused. "You doing all right out here, Eli? I know you keep to yourself, but winter's coming. Might be good to think about moving into town, finding steadier work." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like a man who's trying to beat himself to death one hammer blow at a time." There was no judgment in Brennan's voice, only a weary concern. Eli met his eyes. "Maybe I am." The sheriff sighed. "Well, try not to succeed at it. This town needs a decent blacksmith." He tipped his hat and left the door swinging shut behind him with a soft thud. Alone again, Eli stood motionless in the flickering light. 30 sets of shackles. He walked over to his stock of iron bar, calculating how much he would need. The math was simple. The implications were not. He thought of hands locked in those cuffs, ankles bound, family separated, children crying. The images came unbidden, mixing with older memories until he could not tell past from present. He reached for the whiskey bottle he kept on a high shelf, took a long pull, and felt the burn chase away nothing at all. That night he did not sleep. Instead, he stoked the forge hotter than necessary and began work on the shackles, telling himself it was just iron, just work, just survival. But when dawn came pale and cold through the eastern window, he looked at what he had made and felt the weight of every link. The next morning, Eli loaded a wagon with finished tools and hardware. A ranch up north near Ponderosa Fort had ordered a set of branding irons and some miscellaneous smithing work. The pay was good, and the ride would take him into the high country, away from the stifling heat of the valley floor. He hitched his bay gelding, a sturdy animal named Rain, to the wagon, and set out just after sunrise, when the air still held a hint of coolness. The road climbed steadily into the mountains, winding through stands of ponderosa pine and scrub oak. The higher he went, the easier it became to breathe. Up here the world felt cleaner, somehow less contaminated by human sin. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and once he saw a small herd of mule deer watching him from a rocky outcrop, their ears swiveling to track his passage. He made the delivery by early afternoon, exchanged minimal pleasantries with the ranch foreman, and started back. He should have taken the main road, but something in him wanted to delay his return to Copper Ridge, to the forge, to the pile of shackles waiting to be finished. So he took the old trail that cut through Red Canyon, a route that was rougher and slower, but which offered solitude and a kind of raw beauty that sometimes quieted the voices in his head. He was halfway through the canyon when he heard the gunfire. It came from below and to the west, echoing off the rock walls. Rifle shots, irregular, panicked. Then the sharper crack of military carbines, disciplined and methodical. Eli pulled Rain to a halt and listened. The shooting intensified briefly, then began to scatter and fade. A running fight. Someone was being pursued. Every instinct told him to turn around, to get out of the area, to not get involved. Getting involved was how good intentions turned into nightmares. But something else. Some stubborn remnant of the man he used to be before the war taught him to hate himself, made him guide Rain off the trail and up a rocky slope to a vantage point overlooking the canyon floor. What he saw made his blood run cold. 8 cavalry troopers, their blue uniforms dark with sweat, were engaged in a close-quarters fight with 3 Apache warriors. The Apache were outnumbered, outgunned, and clearly losing. Even as Eli watched, one warrior took a carbine round to the chest and went down hard, his body rolling limply down the slope. The remaining 2 fought with desperate ferocity, one firing arrows from behind a boulder, while the other, armed with a rifle that must have been taken from a dead soldier somewhere, provided covering fire. It was the third figure that froze Eli in place. She stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, a giant among her people, her shoulders as broad as any man's, her arms corded with muscle that flexed and bunched as she swung a stone war club with devastating force. Her long black hair was matted with sweat, and blood streaming behind her as she moved with a speed that should have been impossible for someone of her size. She wore buckskin leggings and a simple tunic, both darkened with moisture and grime. An arrow protruded from her left shoulder, the shaft broken off short, and blood ran freely down her arm. More blood stained her side, where a bullet had grazed her ribs. She was magnificent and terrible a warrior from an older age, and as Eli watched, she brought her club down on a trooper's skull with a sickening crack that echoed off the canyon walls. But there were too many. As one soldier fell, 2 more closed in. The woman spun, deflecting a bayonet thrust with her forearm, but the movement cost her. Another soldier fired from 10 feet away. The bullet took her high in the left side of her torso, spinning her half around. She staggered, went to one knee, and the troopers closed in for the kill. Then something unexpected happened. A whistle, sharp and urgent, came from the ridge above. The soldiers looked up, saw something Eli could not see from his position, and suddenly they were shouting to each other, pulling back mounting horses that had been left further down the canyon. In less than a minute, they were gone, riding hard to the east, leaving their dead behind. The two surviving Apache warriors vanished into the rocks like smoke. But the woman, the giant, she tried to stand and could not. She collapsed onto her side, her breathing harsh and ragged, one hand pressed to the gunshot wound, the other still gripping her club. Eli sat on his horse, hidden among the scrub pine, and watched her. He should leave. He knew that with absolute certainty. If he helped her, and anyone found out, he would be marked as a traitor, hunted down, probably hanged. If he left her, she would die within hours, either from blood loss or from exposure when the cold mountain night set in. The choice should have been simple. But then the woman turned her head, and her eyes met his across the distance. They were dark, almost black, burning with pain and rage, and something else he could not name. She did not cry out. She did not beg. She simply looked at him. And in that look he saw a recognition that chilled him to the bone. She knew what he was. She knew he was white, probably military or former military. She knew he was the enemy. And yet she did not look away. The moment stretched, became unbearable. Eli's hands tightened on the reins. Rein shifted nervously beneath him, sensing his rider's agitation. In his mind, unbidden, came a memory, a canyon not unlike this one. Winter 5 years ago. He was in a sniper position, on a ridge rifle rested on a flat rock scope, trained on a group of Apache fleeing through the snow. His spotter was calling targets. Third from the left. The one carrying the child. Take him. Eli had looked through the scope. He had seen the man clearly. Not young, maybe 50, his face weathered and worn. The child on his back was small, perhaps 3 years old, its arms wrapped around the man's neck. They were running toward a stand of cottonwoods where other Apache were gathering, trying to organize a defense. Take the shot, Carver. He had not wanted to. Everything in him had screamed that this was wrong, that shooting a man carrying a child was murder, not war. But his finger had tightened on the trigger anyway, muscle memory overriding conscience. And then the world had exploded in sound and smoke as the rest of the line opened fire, and when the echoes faded, the man and child were both down in the snow, red spreading beneath them. Except that was not what happened. That was what he had believed for 5 years. That was the memory that woke him in the night, drenched in sweat, hands shaking. But he had never actually seen that man fall through his scope, had he? The smoke had obscured his view. By the time it cleared, the scene was chaos, and he had been aiming at other targets, following orders, doing his duty. But duty or not, 7 Apache had died by his hand that day. 7 confirmed kills. He had the commendations to prove it, locked in a trunk somewhere, never looked at. He stared at the woman bleeding on the canyon floor, and he made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability. He dismounted, moving carefully, keeping his hands visible. The woman tracked his movement with her eyes, her body tensing for a fight she was too weak to win. When he was 20 feet away, she tried to rise, managed to prop herself up on one elbow, and reached for a knife at her belt. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. Eli stopped. He unbuckled his gun belt slowly and hung it on a low branch of a pine tree well out of reach. Then he pulled off his hat and dropped it on the ground. He was unarmed, now vulnerable. If she wanted to kill him, or if her people returned, he would die here and probably deserve it. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly, knowing she probably did not understand English, but hoping his tone would convey his intent. She stared at him, breathing hard, the knife wavering in her grip. He took another step forward. "Let me help, please." The woman's eyes narrowed. Her mouth moved, forming words in her own language, harsh and guttural. He did not need a translation to understand. She was telling him to stay back, to leave, to go to hell. But then her strength gave out. The knife slipped from her fingers, and she sagged back against the rock. Her eyes closed, then fluttered open again, fighting to stay conscious. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and spreading. Eli moved quickly then. He knelt beside her, close enough now to see the details. The arrow in her shoulder was barbed, embedded deep. The bullet wound in her side was bleeding freely, a through-and-through shot that had missed anything vital, but which would kill her by blood loss if not treated. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale beneath the bronze. He ran back to his wagon, grabbed his bedroll, and the small medical kit he carried, relics from his army days. When he returned, the woman was watching him again, her gaze tracking his every move with the intensity of a predator sizing up a threat. "I am going to take the arrow out," he said, knowing she could not understand but needing to say it anyway. "It is going to hurt." He had done this before, more times than he cared to remember. Field medicine in combat conditions. You worked fast, you worked clean, and you tried very hard not to think about the screaming. He pulled out a folding knife, heated the blade briefly with a match to sterilize it, then cut away the fabric around the arrow shaft. The woman hissed through her teeth but did not cry out. The arrowhead was buried deep in muscle. He had to cut around it, prying it loose a fraction of an inch at a time. Blood welled up hot and slick. The woman's hand shot out and gripped his wrist, her fingers like steel. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read, pain and fury and something else. Her grip tightened until he thought the bones might crack. "I know," he whispered. "I know it hurts. I am sorry." He got the arrowhead out and immediately packed the wound with clean cloth, applying pressure until the bleeding slowed. The bullet wound was easier clean entry and exit. He flushed it with whiskey from his canteen, making her gasp and arch her back, then bandaged it tightly. By the time he was finished, the sun was low in the sky, painting the canyon walls orange and gold. The woman had not lost consciousness, but she was fading, her eyes glazing over with shock and exhaustion. Eli knew he had to move her. The soldiers might return. Animals would come for the bodies. This place was not safe. There was a shallow cave about 200 yards up the slope, barely more than an overhang, but it would provide shelter and concealment. Getting her there was going to be the hard part. "Can you stand?" he asked. She looked at him, uncomprehending. He mimed standing, then pointed to the cave. She followed his gesture, seemed to understand, and nodded once, a sharp, jerky movement. Eli got an arm under her shoulders and heaved. She was astonishingly heavy, pure muscle and bone, and it took everything he had to get her upright. She swayed, nearly fell, and he braced himself against her weight. Together, moving in awkward, stumbling steps, they made their way up the slope. It took 20 minutes to cover 200 yards. By the time they reached the cave, Eli was drenched in sweat, and the woman was barely conscious, leaning on him so heavily he thought his knees would buckle. He lowered her carefully onto the cave floor, then collapsed beside her, gasping for breath. For a long time neither of them moved. The cave was cool and dim, the light outside fading to purple dusk. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped and another answered. The woman's breathing was slow and steady, now the edge of panic gone. She was going to live probably if infection did not set in. Eli got a small fire going in the back of the cave using dry wood that would produce minimal smoke. He boiled water from a nearby spring, made a weak broth from jerky and wild onions he found growing nearby, and coaxed the woman into drinking some of it. She did not speak, but she drank, and when he offered her his blanket, she took it without protest. Night came fully, and with it a cold that seeped into the bones. Eli sat by the fire, feeding it small sticks, watching the woman sleep. In the firelight, her face was less fierce, more human. He could see the shape of her cheekbones, the line of her jaw, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks. She was young, he realized, maybe 25, maybe younger, hard to tell with a life lived outdoors under constant threat. On her tunic near the collar he noticed something, embroidery done in the Apache style with porcupine quills dyed red and black. He could not read the symbols, but he recognized the pattern. It was a designation of lineage, a way of marking family and clan. He leaned closer, trying to make out the details without disturbing her sleep. The pattern was distinctive. A stylized eagle wings, spread talons extended. Beneath it, a series of geometric shapes that he had seen before in reports and intelligence briefings from his army days. It was the mark of Nantan's bloodline. Nantan, the medicine man, who had led a band of Apache through the Superstition Mountains for 2 decades, evading capture, teaching his people to survive on nothing, to fight with cunning rather than brute force. Nantan, who had been killed in the winter of 1878 at a place called Black Canyon. Eli felt the world tilt beneath him. His hands began to shake, not the usual tremor, but a violent shuddering that made his teeth chatter. He stood up abruptly, walked to the mouth of the cave, and stared out at the darkness. Black Canyon. He had been there. 3rd Cavalry attached as a sniper to Captain Reynolds' company. Their orders had been to intercept a group of Apache fleeing the reservation, to stop them by any means necessary. They had stopped them. Permanently. He remembered the snow, the way it had muffled sound made everything feel distant and unreal. He remembered lying prone on a ridge rifle across a flat rock scope, dialed in to 300 yards. He remembered his spotter, Sergeant Hodge, calling targets in a bored monotone. 3rd group, the one with the child, take him. And he had, or he thought he had, the smoke, the confusion, the chaos of overlapping fire. He had pulled the trigger, felt the recoil, seen the figure go down. A clean shot, a confirmed kill. Except now, 5 years later, lying awake in the darkness, he could not remember actually seeing the body. He could not remember verifying the target. He just remembered the shot, the smoke, and the terrible certainty that he had killed a man carrying a child to safety. If this woman was Nantan's daughter, then the man he had shot might have been her father. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He doubled over, bracing his hands on his knees, fighting the urge to vomit. Behind him, the woman stirred, murmured something in her sleep, and was quiet again. Eli straightened slowly, forcing himself to breathe, to think. He should tell her. That was the right thing to do, was it not? To confess, to give her the chance to know who had destroyed her family. But the words stuck in his throat, bitter and cowardly. What would he even say? I think I might have killed your father, I am not sure. But there is a good chance. The hours crawled past. Eli did not sleep. He sat by the dying fire, staring at the woman, and felt the weight of 5 years of running, of hiding, of pretending he could outrun what he had done, settle onto his shoulders like a yoke of lead. Dawn came gray and cold. The woman woke slowly, blinking against the pale light. She sat up with a wince, testing her injuries, and found them bandaged and stable. She looked at Eli, and for the first time there was something other than hostility in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps, a wary curiosity. Eli cleared his throat. How do you feel? She did not answer, but she touched the bandage on her shoulder, then the one on her side, as if confirming they were real. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of hardtack, offering it to her. She took it cautiously, sniffed it, then bit into it with strong white teeth. They ate in silence, the fire reduced to embers, the morning birds beginning their song outside. After a while the woman spoke. Her voice was deeper than he had expected, rough from disuse or pain or both. She said something in Apache, a string of words that meant nothing to him. Then she tried again, this time in halting English. Why you help? The question was simple. The answer was anything but. Eli looked at her, at this woman who was easily 6 inches taller than him, who could probably break him in half, even wounded, who had every reason to hate him on sight. He thought about lying, about making up some noble reason, but he had lied enough to himself and others. Because I owe your people a debt, he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "White man owe nothing. White man take." "I took," he admitted, "more than I can ever give back, but maybe I can start by helping you." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face for deceit or weakness. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy, or at least not alarm her, because she nodded slowly. "You soldier," she said. It was not a question. Was not anymore. Why not? Eli looked down at his hands, at the scars and calluses, at the faint tremor that never quite went away. "Because I could not do it anymore. The killing." The woman made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snort of derision. "All white men kill, soldier or not." "You are right," he said. "We do." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then the woman asked, "What name?" "Elijah. Elijah Carver. People call me Eli." "Eli," she repeated, testing the sound. Then she pointed to herself. "Ayasha." "Ayasha," he echoed. It meant something, he thought, but he did not know what. A name from a language he had never bothered to learn even when he was hunting her people through the mountains. She touched the embroidery on her tunic, the eagle symbol, and said something in Apache that he did not catch. But he understood anyway. She was telling him who she was, where she came from. She was Nantan's daughter. Confirmation of what he had feared. His heart hammered against his ribs. The moment had come. He could tell her, now could lay the truth at her feet and accept whatever judgment she delivered. Or he could stay silent, could carry this secret a while longer, could pretend that this fragile peace between them was not built on a foundation of blood and lies. Before he could decide, Ayasha spoke again. "You take me home, home, to her people wherever they were hiding in these mountains, to safety to her family." It was a simple request. It was also suicide. If he walked into an Apache camp, they would kill him on sight, white skin or no white skin, good intentions or no good intentions. But looking at her, at the way she held herself, despite the pain, at the fierce pride in her eyes, even now he found himself nodding. "Yes," he said, "I will take you home." She studied him again, and this time when she looked at him, there was something else in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The first crack in a wall that had been built over lifetimes of grief and betrayal. They rested through the day, letting her body recover some strength. Eli kept watch, listening for sounds of pursuit, but the canyon remained quiet, except for the wind and the occasional call of a raven. By late afternoon, Ayasha was able to stand on her own, though she moved stiffly and favored her wounded side. He helped her down to where he had left his wagon and horse. Rain nickered nervously at the side of Ayasha, but settled when Eli stroked his neck and spoke to him in low tones. Getting Ayasha into the wagon was a challenge. She was tall enough that sitting normally was awkward, and her injuries made every movement painful. Eventually, they worked out a system where she could half recline against the sideboard, one leg stretched out, the other bent. "Which way?" Eli asked, gathering the reins. Ayasha pointed northeast toward the higher peaks. "Sleeping Rock Valley, 3 days." 3 days. 3 days of traveling through country where any patrol or settler might see them, might report them, might decide to take matters into their own hands. 3 days of risking everything for a woman he had known less than 24 hours. Eli clicked his tongue and Rain started forward. The wagon creaked and swayed over the rough ground, heading away from Copper Ridge, away from his forge and his life, and everything he knew. He did not look back. They traveled slowly, keeping to game trails and avoiding the main roads. At night they made cold camps, no fires to give away their position. Ayasha did not speak much, and when she did, it was in short, clipped sentences. How far to water, when to rest, whether the high ridge or the low valley. But on the second night, as they sat in the darkness, under a sky so thick with stars, it seemed unreal, she broke the pattern. "You say you owe debt," she said. What debt? Eli had been dreading this question. He stared up at the Milky Way, a river of light across the void, and tried to find words that would not sound like excuses. "I was a soldier," he began, "a sharpshooter, sniper. My job was to kill from a distance people who never saw me coming. I was good at it. Too good." He paused, swallowed hard. "In the winter of 1878, my unit was sent to stop a group of Apache who had left the reservation. We found them in a place called Black Canyon." Beside him, Ayasha went very still. He could feel the weight of her attention, sharp and focused. "We were told they were hostile, that they were raiding settlements, killing settlers. We were told to stop them by any means necessary, so we did." His voice cracked, and he had to stop, had to force himself to continue. "I do not know how many I killed that day. 7, they said in the after-action report. 7 confirmed kills. Men, women, anyone who ran." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the insects seemed to have stopped their chirping, as if the night itself was holding its breath. "Black Canyon," Ayasha said finally, her voice flat and hard. "My father died there." Eli closed his eyes. There it was, the truth spoken aloud, irrevocable. "Nantan was your father," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." "Sorry not bring him back?" "No, it does not." Ayasha turned to look at him, and in the starlight, her face was a mask of stone. "You kill him." The question hung between them, terrible in its simplicity. Eli thought about lying, about claiming he did not know, could not be sure. But he had lied enough, and this woman deserved better. "I do not know," he said honestly. "There was a man carrying a child running toward cover. My spotter called the target. I fired. There was smoke, confusion. I thought I hit him, but I never confirmed it. I was already moving to the next target." He looked at her directly. "But even if I did not pull the trigger that killed him, I was there. I was part of it. I helped make it happen. So yes, I am responsible." Ayasha was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father was medicine man, healer. He not fight. He run because soldiers come to reservation, say all Apache must go to new place, bad place, with no water, no food. He take the sick ones, the children who could not walk far, and he run, try to hide in mountains until winter pass." "He was trying to save them," Eli said. "Yes, and you kill him for it." There was no accusation in her tone, no anger, just a flat statement of fact, which somehow made it worse. Eli stood up, unable to sit still any longer. He walked a few paces away, his hands clenched into fists, fighting the urge to scream or run or do something, anything to escape the weight crushing down on him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something he had carried for 5 years, a small leather pouch, worn and stained. He opened it, and by starlight he could just make out the glint of silver. A necklace Apache made with a pendant in the shape of an eagle, wings spread. He had found it at Black Canyon in the snow near one of the bodies. He had picked it up without thinking, slipped it into his pocket, and carried it with him when he deserted a week later. It had been his penance, his reminder, his way of never letting himself forget. He walked back to Ayasha and held it out to her. She took it, her fingers trembling as they closed around the familiar metal. She stared at it, then raised her eyes to his face. "This is his," she said. "My father's. I make it for him when I am 12 years old." "I know," Eli said. "I mean, I did not know who it belonged to, but I knew it was important. I kept it. I thought maybe someday I could return. It could make things right somehow. But you cannot make this right, can you?" Ayasha clutched the necklace to her chest, and for the first time since he had met her, her iron control cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and terrible. She did not sob, did not wail, she just cried, and the sight of it broke something in Eli that he had not known was still whole. "I thought I could run from it," he said, "from what I did. I left the army, left everything, tried to bury myself in work and whiskey and silence. But it follows me. Every night I see their faces. I hear the screams. And I know that nothing I do will ever be enough to balance the scales." Ayasha wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. She looked at Eli, really looked at him, and what she saw seemed to surprise her. "You hate yourself," she said. "Yes." "Good," she said. You should. She stood up, moving carefully, and walked to where he had hung his gun belt on the wagon. She drew his revolver from its holster, checked that it was loaded, and walked back to stand in front of him. She pressed the gun into his hand, then placed his hand against her chest over her heart. "Shoot me," she said. Eli stared at her, horrified. "What? No, no, I will not. You owe me death for death, my father for my life. Shoot me, and debt is paid." "Ayesha, I cannot." "Then you are a coward," she said. "You say you're sorry, you say you owe debt, but when I give you chance to pay, you refuse. You want forgiveness without price. That is not how it works." Her hand covered his, pressing the barrel harder against her chest. He could feel her heart beating strong and steady. His own hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the gun. "If you shoot me," she continued, "you die too. My brother find you. My people hunt you. But maybe that is what you want. Maybe you want to die, but you too scared to do it yourself. So I give you reason." "I do not want to die," Eli said, his voice breaking. "And I do not want you to die. I want to fix this, to make it right." "You cannot fix." Ayesha shouted, her composure finally shattering. "My father is dead. My mother is dead. My little sister is dead. All dead because white men say our land is their land. Our life is worth nothing. You cannot fix that with sorry or with this." She shook the necklace. "So shoot me or do not shoot me, but do not lie and say you want to make right." Eli let the gun drop. It fell to the ground between them, forgotten. He sank to his knees, his head bowed, and he did something he had not done since he was a child. He wept. Great racking sobs that tore through him, years of guilt and grief and self-hatred pouring out in ugly, choking gasps. Ayesha stood over him, watching her own tears still wet on her face. After a long moment she knelt beside him. She did not touch him, did not offer comfort. She just knelt there, and together they cried for everything that had been lost, everything that could never be recovered. When the tears finally subsided, leaving them both hollow and exhausted, Ayesha spoke again. Her voice was gentler now, drained of anger. "Why you save me?" she asked. "In canyon. You could ride away. No one know. Why you help?" Eli wiped his face with his sleeve, not caring how he looked. "Because I could not let another one die. Not if I could stop it. I thought maybe if I saved one life, it might balance just a little bit against all the ones I took. I know it does not. I know it is selfish, but I had to try." Ayesha picked up the gun from where it had fallen and looked at it. For a moment Eli thought she might actually shoot him, and part of him almost hoped she would. But instead she emptied the chambers, letting the bullets fall into the dirt, and handed the empty revolver back to him. "I not kill you," she said. "Not because you deserve to live, but because my father teach me something. He say revenge is fire that burn everything, even the person who light it. If I kill you, I become like you. Killer. And my father not want that." "I do not deserve your mercy," Eli said. "No," Ayesha agreed. "But I not give mercy for you. I give it for me, so I can sleep at night." She stood up, swaying slightly, and Eli realized how much the emotional ordeal had cost her on top of her physical injuries. He rose and steadied her with a hand on her elbow. She did not pull away. "We should rest," he said. "You need to heal." She nodded. But before they settled down, she looked at him one more time. "Eli Carver," she said, testing his name. "You cannot fix the past, but maybe you can do something about now, about what is coming for my people." "What do you mean? You say town is making shackles for moving Apache. That mean army is coming soon. My people are in Sleeping Rock Valley hiding. If army find them, there will be more Black Canyon, more death." Eli felt a chill run through him. "I do not know how to stop that." "Then we learn together," Ayesha said. "Because I cannot do it alone. And you say you want to make right, so make right." She wrapped herself in the blanket and lay down, turning her back to him. The conversation was over. Eli stood in the darkness, looking at her silhouette against the stars, and felt the first stirrings of something he had not felt in 5 years, Purpose, not redemption. He was not naive enough to think he could ever be redeemed, but purpose. A reason to keep breathing, to keep moving forward, to do something other than just survive. He settled down on the other side of the small camp, the empty gun heavy in his hand. Tomorrow they would continue toward Sleeping Rock Valley. And after that he did not know. But for the first time since Black Canyon, the future felt like something other than just an endless gray march toward nothing. He closed his eyes and, against all odds, slept without nightmares. The gunshot cracked through the night, and Eli felt the impact before he heard the sound. The bullet punched through his left shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He lay in the dirt, gasping blood spreading dark and warm across his shirt. Above him, Ayesha stood with the smoking revolver, her hand shaking. She had pulled the trigger, but at the last instant something had made her flinch. Not enough to miss entirely, but enough to shift her aim from his heart to his shoulder. She stared at him, at the blood, at the way he made no move to defend himself. Then she dropped the gun and turned away, disappearing into the darkness. Eli lay there for a long time, the pain sharp and clarifying. He was alive. She had chosen in that final moment not to kill him. He pressed his hand to the wound, feeling the hot pulse of blood, and passed out. When he woke, it was dawn. Someone had bandaged his shoulder crudely. Ayesha, he realized, though she was nowhere to be seen. The message was clear. You live, but you owe me everything. He had collapsed into the dirt, gasping blood spreading dark across his shirt, and she had stood over him with the smoking gun trembling, unable to fire again. Dawn broke 3 days later as they approached the edge of Sleeping Rock Valley. Eli's shoulder throbbed with each jolt of the wagon, the wound bandaged with strips torn from his own shirt and bound tight enough to stop the bleeding, but not tight enough to stop the pain. Ayesha sat beside him now, rather than in the back, her injuries healing faster than his, her natural strength reasserting itself. They had not spoken much since that night. The confession hung between them like smoke, visible but untouchable. Eli kept his eyes on the trail. Ayesha watched the ridgelines, alert for patrols or threats. They moved through the high country like ghosts, two damaged souls, bound together by circumstance and blood. "Stop here," Ayesha said suddenly. Eli pulled rein to a halt. They were at the mouth of a narrow canyon, its walls rising steep on either side, choked with juniper and scrub oak. Ayesha climbed down from the wagon, moving with the careful deliberation of someone testing their limits. She walked a few paces forward, studying the ground, then looked back at him. "From here, I go alone," she said. Something twisted in Eli's chest. "I thought I was taking you home." "You did. This is border of our land. If you go further, my people will kill you before I can explain." Her expression softened slightly. "You saved my life, Eli Carver. I not let them take yours." He nodded slowly, understanding, but not liking it. "What will you do?" "Go to my brother. Tell council what is coming. Prepare." She paused, then added, "What will you do?" "Go back to Copper Ridge. Finish the shackles." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "I do not have a choice. If I do not deliver them, they will know something is wrong." Ayesha studied him for a long moment. "You always have choice. You just not always like the choices." She was right, of course. He could refuse, the job could pack up and disappear into the territories, could become a different kind of ghost. But running had not worked for 5 years. Running had only made the ghosts louder. "Be careful," he said finally. "You too." Ayesha reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand briefly on his good shoulder. The contact was fleeting, but solid, an acknowledgment of something neither of them could name. Then she turned and walked into the canyon, her tall frame disappearing into the shadows between the rocks. Eli sat alone in the wagon for a long time, watching the place where she had vanished. Then he turned rein around and started the long journey back. The town of Copper Ridge looked different when he returned, or perhaps it was Eli who had changed. The main street with its false front buildings, the saloon with its perpetual noise, The general store with its barrels of flour and salt pork, all of it seemed smaller, somehow more fragile. He saw it now through Ayesha's eyes, this collection of wood and nails and human ambition planted like a flag on land that had belonged to someone else for centuries. Sheriff Brennan found him at the forge that evening. Eli was working despite his injured shoulder, the hammer falling with less force but the same rhythm. Strike, turn, strike. The links of chain slowly taking shape. "You look like hell," Brennan observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Feel worse." "Where have you been?" "You were supposed to be back 3 days ago." Eli did not look up from his work. "Got delayed. Wagon trouble." Brennan was quiet for a moment, his lawman's instincts clearly sensing a lie but not pressing it. "You finish those shackles, you hear about what is happening at the territorial capital." "No." Governor Ashford announced the relocation date, October 15th, 3 weeks from now. Army is mobilizing a full company out of Fort Apache to sweep the high country. Brennan paused. "They are not just relocating families, Eli. They are hunting down anyone who resists. Shoot on sight orders for any warrior who does not surrender." The hammer slipped from Eli's grip, clanging against the anvil. "That is not relocation. That is extermination." "That is politics," Brennan corrected. "Clayton Voss has been lobbying the governor for months. Turns out there is a silver deposit under Sleeping Rock Valley, big one. Geological survey came back last week. Voss wants the mining rights, but he cannot get them while Apache are camped on top of it." Eli's blood ran cold. "So he is buying a massacre." "He is facilitating economic development," Brennan said, his tone making it clear what he thought of that particular euphemism. "Word is he has already hired a private security force. 20 men, all experienced Indian fighters. They will ride ahead of the army, provoke an incident, and give the soldiers an excuse to go in hard." "You have to stop this." Brennan laughed a bitter sound. "I am a county sheriff, Eli. I have jurisdiction over one small town and the immediate area. Fort Apache answers to the Territorial Command, and they answer to Washington. What exactly do you think I can do?" Eli had no answer. He picked up the hammer again, his hands shaking worse than usual. Brennan watched him for a moment longer, then shook his head and left without another word. That night Eli did not sleep. He lay on his cot in the small room behind the forge, staring at the ceiling, doing calculations in his head. 3 weeks, 20 hired guns, plus a full company of cavalry, maybe 100 men total. Against how many Apache, Ayesha had not said. Could be 50 warriors, could be less. Even if every man, woman, and child fought, they would be outnumbered and outgunned. Black Canyon all over again. Only this time he would be helping to build the cage they were put in before the slaughter. He thought about what Ayesha had said. "You cannot fix the past, but maybe you can do something about now." The idea came to him slowly, taking shape like iron under the hammer. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was something. 2 days later, Eli rode out of Copper Ridge before dawn, heading not toward Sleeping Rock Valley, but toward Copper Ridge's sister town of Silverton, 20 miles to the southeast. Silverton was bigger, rougher, the kind of place where questions were not asked and memories were short. It had a telegraph office. He composed the message carefully, addressing it to a name he had not spoken in 5 years. Lieutenant Marcus Kane, currently stationed at Fort Huachuca, according to the last Eli had heard. Kane had been Eli's spotter during the war, the man who had called targets while Eli pulled triggers. They had saved each other's lives more than once. They had also shared a flask the night before Black Canyon and promised to meet for a drink when the war was over. The war had ended. They had never had that drink. The telegram was brief. "Marcus, need information on October operation, Apache relocation. What are the real orders? Carver." He paid the telegrapher, a thin man with ink-stained fingers who did not care what the message said as long as the money was good, and rode back to Copper Ridge to wait. The response came 3 days later, delivered by a boy from the telegraph office. Eli tore it open with shaking hands. Carver, orders are suppression, not relocation. Voss paid for results. Command expects casualties. Get out of the area. This is not your fight anymore. Kane. Eli read it twice, then burned it in the forge. Not his fight. Kane was wrong. This had always been his fight. He just had not realized it until a woman nearly 2 feet taller than most men had looked at him with eyes full of justified hatred and chosen not to pull the trigger. He worked through the night not on shackles but on something else. By morning he had a plan. It was thin, full of holes likely to get everyone involved killed, but it was better than nothing. The problem was he could not execute it alone. He needed help. He needed Ayasha. The journey back to Sleeping Rock Valley took 2 days. He left Rain and the wagon hidden in a ravine 5 miles out and went the rest of the way on foot, moving carefully, watching for sentries. The Apache would have scouts posted. If they saw him coming, they would shoot first and never bother with questions. He almost made it to the canyon mouth before the arrow appeared, materializing out of empty air to embed itself in the ground 2 inches from his left boot. Eli froze. "I am looking for Ayasha," he called out in English, then repeated it in the few words of Apache he knew. "Ayasha, friend." A figure dropped from a rock ledge above him, landing in a crouch with inhuman grace. It was a man, early 30s, tall though not as tall as Ayasha, his body a network of scars and hard muscle. He had a rifle pointed at Eli's chest, and an expression that promised absolutely nothing good. "White man does not have friends here," the man said in perfect English. "I helped Ayasha. After the fight in Red Canyon, I brought her home." The rifle did not waver. "She told us. She also told us you are the one who killed our father." Eli's breath caught. This, then, was Tahoma, Ayasha's brother. The resemblance was there in the cheekbones, the set of the jaw, the burning intelligence in the eyes. But where Ayasha had shown him a glimpse of mercy, Tahoma showed nothing but cold calculation. "I was there," Eli admitted, "at Black Canyon. I did not pull the trigger that killed him, but I was part of it. I am guilty. Then why should I not kill you now? Because I have information about the army, about what is coming." Eli met Tahoma's gaze directly. "And because your sister let me live for a reason. Talk to her. Let her decide." Tahoma considered this, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Then he whistled a sharp 2-note call. 3 more warriors emerged from concealment, surrounding Eli completely. Tahoma lowered his rifle slightly, but did not put it away. "Walk," he commanded. "Any wrong move, you die." They took him through a series of switchbacks and hidden trails, a route designed to confuse and disorient. Eli lost track of direction within minutes. Finally, they emerged into a hidden valley, small and green, fed by a spring that bubbled up from between the rocks. A dozen wickiups were scattered around the valley floor, smoke rising from cooking fires. Perhaps 50 people total, Eli estimated, maybe 30 of them capable of fighting, against 100 soldiers and 20 professional killers. Ayasha saw him before he saw her. She was carrying water from the spring, a large clay vessel balanced on her shoulder as if it weighed nothing. When she spotted Eli being escorted at gunpoint, she set the vessel down carefully and strode over her face, unreadable. "Why are you here?" she asked. "I have information. The army is not coming to relocate you. They are coming to wipe you out." "October 15th, 3 weeks," Tahoma spat on the ground. "We already know this. We have scouts. We have eyes." "Do you know about the mining company? About why they want you dead?" That got their attention. Ayasha and Tahoma exchanged glances. "What mining company?" Ayasha asked. Eli told them about Clayton Voss, about the silver deposit, about the hired guns and the manufactured incident. He told them about the telegram from Kane about the orders for suppression rather than relocation. He laid it all out, watching their faces grow harder with each word. When he finished, Tahoma was the first to speak. "So they will kill us for rocks in the ground." "Yes." "And you come here to warn us, to make yourself feel better about your guilt." "No," Eli said. "I came here because I have a plan, a way to stop this without everyone dying." "Impossible," Tahoma said flatly. "We cannot win a fight against that many guns." "You are right. You cannot win a fight. So do not fight, not with bullets." Ayasha stepped closer. "Explain." Eli took a breath. "Voss needs a massacre. He needs you to be the aggressors, the dangerous savages that have to be put down. If you do not give him that, if you instead surrender peacefully to the army, he loses his justification." "Surrender means death on the reservation," Ayasha said. "Not if there are witnesses, not if the whole thing happens in public, in a way that makes it impossible for Voss to spin it as an Apache attack." Eli pulled a folded map from his pocket one he had sketched from memory. "There is a town called Cedar Springs, 40 miles west of here. It has a newspaper, a telegraph office, and a circuit judge who is due to arrive on October 10th. If you can get your people there, if you can surrender to the judge instead of the army in front of reporters and townspeople, then Voss cannot touch you. The law will be on your side." "The law," Tahoma said with contempt. "White man's law that has never protected us." "But it might protect you if everyone is watching," Eli countered. "Voss is powerful, but he is not stupid. He will not risk a public execution, not with witnesses, not with journalists who can send stories to newspapers in San Francisco and New York." Ayasha was studying the map, her brow furrowed in concentration. 40 miles through territory patrolled by Army and Voss's men, with elders, children wounded. How do we make that journey without being caught? "I will guide you," Eli said. "I know the patrol routes. I know where the water is, where to hide. And I will go ahead to Cedar Springs, talk to the judge, make sure he is ready to receive you." "Why?" Tahoma demanded, stepping forward until he was inches from Eli's face. "Why do you do this? Is it guilt? Is it pity? Do you think saving us now erases what you did then?" "No," Eli said quietly. "Nothing erases that. But I am done running from it. And I am done watching people die when I could do something to stop it." Tahoma looked ready to argue further, but Ayasha placed a hand on his arm. "Brother, we need to talk. Alone." They withdrew to one of the wickiups, leaving Eli standing in the center of the camp under the watchful eyes of armed warriors. He could hear raised voices from inside the shelter, Ayasha and Tahoma arguing in rapid fire. Apache. The conversation went on for nearly an hour. When they emerged, Ayasha's face was set in grim determination. "We will try your plan," she said. "But if this is a trick, if you lead soldiers to us, I will kill you myself." "Understood. And you will not guide us. You will stay here with the people until we reach Cedar Springs. You will be our prisoner. That way, if something goes wrong, we have leverage." Eli had not expected that, but it made sense from their perspective. "All right." "We leave in 3 days," Ayasha continued. "That gives the scouts time to check the route to make sure your information is correct. If they find army patrols where you say they will be, then maybe we trust you a little. If not—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Those 3 days were the strangest of Eli's life. He was given food and water, treated with wary courtesy, but never allowed to be alone. He slept in a wickiup with 2 warriors who watched him in shifts. During the day, he helped where he was allowed, carrying water, gathering firewood, even helping to repair a broken axle on one of the travois that would carry the elderly and injured. The children watched him with wide eyes, staying well back but curious. One small boy, perhaps 6 years old, eventually worked up the courage to approach. He stared up at Eli, then reached out and touched his pale skin with one finger as if checking to see if it was real. "Careful," Eli said gently. "I might be contagious." The boy did not understand the words but caught the tone. He giggled and ran back to his mother, who pulled him close and gave Eli a look that mixed fear with something that might have been grudging respect. On the second day, an old woman approached him. She was tiny, wizened, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as obsidian. She spoke no English, but through gestures and a younger woman translating, she made her meaning clear. She wanted to see his shoulder wound. Eli removed his shirt, revealing the bandage. The old woman unwrapped it, examined the bullet hole with practiced efficiency, then made a disapproving sound. She returned with a poultice that smelled of sage and other herbs Eli could not identify. She packed it into the wound, rewrapped it with clean cloth, and gave him a stern lecture in Apache that the translator summarized as, "You are stupid for letting it get infected. Use this twice a day or lose the arm." That night, as Eli lay in the wickiup listening to the sounds of the camp settling for sleep, Ayesha appeared at the entrance. "Come," she said, "walk with me." They walked in silence to the edge of the valley where the spring emerged from the rocks. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Ayesha sat on a flat boulder, and after a moment Eli sat beside her, careful to keep some distance between them. "My scouts confirm your information," she said. "The patrol routes are where you said. The water holes are where you said. You do not lie, at least not about this." "I have lied enough," Eli said. "I am trying to stop." She was quiet for a while, her gaze on the water. "My brother wants to kill you. Many others do too. They say you cannot be trusted, that this is a trap." "What do you say?" "I say, I do not know." She turned to look at him. "You confuse me, Eli Carver. You are my enemy. You are part of the thing that destroyed my family, but you also saved my life. You also came back knowing you might die to warn us. I do not understand you." "I do not understand myself," Eli admitted. "For 5 years I thought I killed your father. I carried that weight every day, every hour. It made me want to die, but I was too much of a coward to do it. Then I found out it was not me. Another soldier pulled that trigger. And you know what? It did not make me feel better. Because I still killed 7 other people that day. 7 families destroyed, 7 absences in the world. So whether I killed Nantan or not does not matter. I am still guilty." Ayesha absorbed this. "The old woman who treated your wound, her name is Nashoba. Her son was one of the 7 you killed. She knows this. I told her." Eli felt his stomach drop. "Then why did she help me?" "Because that is who she is. Because she believes healing is stronger than hate." Ayesha paused. She lost her son, her husband, her brother in various fights with white men. She has more reason to hate than almost anyone. But she says hate is a poison. It kills the person who carries it. They sat in silence, the spring's gentle burble the only sound. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said finally. "Yes." "That night, when you shot me, why did you miss?" Ayesha laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think I miss? I am best shot in our people. I could hit a rabbit at 200 paces. "Then why?" She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Because when I looked at you, when you knelt there waiting for me to kill you, I saw something. Not a soldier, not an enemy, just a broken man, like me. I saw someone who had lost everything, who hated himself more than I could ever hate him. And I thought, if I kill him, what does it change? Does it bring my father back? Does it make the world better?" She shook her head. "It just makes 2 dead people instead of 1. "I wish you had killed me," Eli said softly. "It would have been easier." "Yes," Ayesha agreed. "But easy is not the same as right." She stood up, ready to return to camp, but Eli stopped her with a question. "Ayesha, what does your name mean?" She looked at him surprised. "It means little one. My father gave it to me as a joke when I was born. I was the smallest baby anyone had seen. Then I grew." A faint smile touched her lips. He used to laugh about it. He would say the spirits gave him the wrong name to keep him humble. "He sounds like he was a good man. He was the best man." Her expression hardened, which is why they killed him. "Good men are dangerous to empires." She walked away, leaving Eli alone with the moonlight and the endless weight of things that could never be undone. The journey began on the fourth day just before dawn. The entire camp was struck in less than 2 hours. The wickiups collapsed and packed supplies loaded onto travois, pulled by horses or strong backs. Eli found himself walking in the middle of the column, surrounded by warriors who kept their weapons ready and their eyes on him. Ayasha and Tahoma led from the front, setting a pace that was fast but sustainable. They moved through country that seemed impassable, following game trails and dry washes that Eli would have never noticed on his own. The Apache knew this land in a way that went beyond mere maps. They knew where the water would pool after rain, where the rocks would provide shade in the midday heat, where a canyon would amplify sound and give away their position. On the second day, they nearly ran into an army patrol. Scouts spotted the blue uniforms from a mile away, and the entire column melted into a rocky ravine. Children hushed with gentle hands over mouths, horses quieted with knowing touches. Eli lay pressed against the stone, hardly daring to breathe, as 12 cavalry troopers rode past less than 100 yards away, so close he could hear their conversation. "Damned waste of time," one soldier was saying. "Apache are probably in Mexico by now. Captain says we are supposed to sweep every canyon between here and the Mogollon Rim, so that is what we do." Their voices faded. The column waited another hour before moving, letting the patrol get well ahead. When they finally emerged from hiding, Eli saw Ayasha looking at him with an expression that might have been grudging respect. That night they camped in a box canyon with a single narrow entrance, easy to defend. Eli sat by a small fire, watching the stars emerge one by one, when a shadow fell across him. It was the boy who had touched his skin days before. He held something in his hands, offering it to Eli with shy solemnity. It was a small carving, a horse made from pine wood, rough but charming. "For me?" Eli asked. The boy nodded. "Thank you." Eli took it carefully, turning it over in his hands. "It is beautiful." The boy smiled radiant and ran back to his mother. The woman met Eli's eyes across the fire and nodded once, a tiny acknowledgement. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but recognition of a gesture, a moment of shared humanity in a world that seemed determined to strip it away. On the fourth day, disaster struck. They were crossing an exposed ridge, unavoidable on the route to Cedar Springs, when shots rang out. Not from the army, from Voss's hired guns. There were 8 of them positioned on higher ground, and their first volley killed 2 horses and wounded an elderly man. The Apache warriors responded instantly, returning fire and rushing the wounded to cover, but it was a bad position. They were exposed, pinned down, and the hired guns were experienced fighters who knew how to use terrain. Eli found himself pressed behind a boulder next to Ayasha, bullets whining overhead. "How many?" she shouted over the gunfire. 8, maybe 10. They are trying to push us back, trap us in the valley below." "Where are they?" He risked a glance. "High rocks, 2 o'clock. Good position." Ayasha swore in Apache. "We cannot stay here. Too exposed. But if we retreat, we lose the high ground." Tahoma crawled over, his rifle in hand. "We need to break contact. Create smoke confusion, fall back to that boulder field we passed an hour ago." "Too many will die in the retreat," Ayasha said. "More will die if we stay," Tahoma countered. Eli looked at the hired gun's position, doing calculations in his head. Range, wind, angle, the same calculations he had done 1,000 times through a rifle scope. His hands were shaking, as they always did, but his mind was clear. "Give me a rifle," he said. Tahoma stared at him. "What? A rifle? I can take them out. 3, maybe 4 before they realize where I am shooting from. That will be enough to break their position, let you retreat safely." "You cannot hold a rifle steady," Ayasha said, not unkindly. "I have seen your hands." "Not a rifle," Eli agreed. "But a bow, maybe." Tahoma barked a laugh. "You think you can use a bow better than a rifle?" "I do not know," Eli admitted. "But I would like to try." Something passed between Ayasha and her brother, a silent communication. Then Tahoma unslung the bow from his back and handed it to Eli along with a quiver of arrows. "Do not miss," he said. Eli nocked an arrow, feeling the pull of the string, the balance of the weapon. It was different from a rifle, more organic, requiring a different kind of precision. But his hands, those treacherous, shaking hands, were steadier with the bow than they had been with any gun in 5 years. He rose slightly, drew, aimed at the figure furthest to the right, released. The arrow flew true, taking the man in the upper chest. He toppled backward with a cry. Before his companions could react, Eli had knocked and released again. The second arrow missed, clattering off rock. The third took another man in the shoulder. Now the hired guns were scrambling, trying to relocate, no longer confident in their superior position. Tahoma and the other warriors used the confusion to lay down suppressing fire, and Eli kept shooting arrow after arrow, not all hitting, but enough forcing the enemy to keep their heads down. "Now," Ayasha shouted, "everyone move!" The retreat was orderly despite the chaos. The warriors covered the families, moving them quickly down the slope and into the boulder field. Eli was the last to leave the position, walking backward, bull ready, covering their escape. A bullet creased his leg, shallow but burning. Another clipped his ear so close he felt the heat. But he kept moving, kept shooting until they were out of effective range, and the hired guns did not dare follow into the boulder field where the advantage would shift. They regrouped an hour later, doing a quick count. 2 dead, 5 wounded, but everyone else accounted for. Ayasha found Eli sitting against a rock, trying to bandage his leg with shaking hands. "Let me," she said, kneeling beside him. Her touch was gentle despite her size and strength. She cleaned the wound, applied the same sage poultice Neshoba had used on his shoulder, and wrapped it efficiently. "Where did you learn to shoot a bow?" she asked. "I did not," Eli said. "I just tried. Figured it could not be worse than a rifle." "You saved lives today. I took lives too. Those men I shot, they might be dead. They were trying to kill children," Ayasha said flatly. "Do not waste guilt on them." Eli looked at her, this woman who had every reason to hate him, who was instead carefully tending his wounds. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me with the bow." "I did not trust you," she corrected. "I was desperate. But you did well." She paused. "My brother says you fight like Apache now. He means it as a compliment. Tell him I am honored." She stood ready to return to the others, but hesitated. "Eli, when we get to Cedar Springs, when this is over, what will you do?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I have not thought that far ahead." "Think about it," she said. "Because you cannot go back to what you were. That man is dead. You need to decide who you will be now." That night the camp was subdued. They had lost friends, family. The hired guns had found them, despite their precautions, which meant Voss knew they were moving. The race was on now, and Cedar Springs was still 15 miles away. Eli found himself unable to sleep. He walked the perimeter of the camp, keeping to the shadows, when he encountered Neshoba, the old medicine woman. She was sitting on a flat rock, grinding herbs with a stone pestle, humming softly to herself. She looked up as he approached, and to his surprise, gestured for him to sit. He did, settling carefully onto the ground nearby. She continued her work for a moment, then spoke in Apache. Eli did not understand the words, but her tone was gentle, almost conversational. A younger woman, one of the scouts, happened to be passing and paused. "She says you have death inside you," the scout translated, "but also life. She says these things are at war in your spirit." Eli nodded slowly. "She is right." Neshoba spoke again, longer this time. The scout listened, then translated, "She says her son, the one you killed, his name was Keel. He was 23 years old. He liked to sing and to make his daughter laugh. He was teaching her to ride when the soldiers came." Eli felt tears burning his eyes. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." More Apache, softer now. "She says sorry is a word. It is air and sound and nothing more. What matters is what you do with your life now. You can carry the death inside you until it poisons everything. Or you can use it to make you stronger, to protect life instead of taking it." She says the choice is yours." Neshoba reached out and placed her small, weathered hand on Eli's head, murmuring something that sounded like a blessing. Then she stood, gathered her herbs, and walked away into the darkness, leaving Eli sitting alone with tears streaming down his face. He sat there for a long time, feeling something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. He did not deserve that, and might never. But something else. A loosening of the knot that had been strangling him for 5 years. Permission maybe to try to be better. To do better. When he finally returned to his sleeping place, Ayesha was waiting by the fire. She looked up as he approached. "Cannot sleep. Not yet." He sat down across from her. "Neshoba told me about her son, about Kayla. I know. She told me she would. How can she be so kind to me, after what I did?" Ayesha poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. "Because she has learned something most people never do. That revenge and justice are not the same thing. Revenge is about making yourself feel better by making someone else feel worse. Justice is about making things right, or as right as they can be." She looked at him directly. "You cannot make things right with Cale. He is dead, but maybe you can make things right with the living. Is that what I am doing?" "Making things right. I do not know yet," Ayesha said honestly. "Ask me again when we reach Cedar Springs, if we reach Cedar Springs." 2 days later, battered and exhausted, they saw the town in the distance. Cedar Springs was small, just a cluster of buildings around a central square, but it had what they needed: a telegraph office, a newspaper office, and, most importantly, a visiting circuit judge who happened to be in town for the monthly court session. They made camp in the hills outside town as the sun set. Ayesha, Tahoma, and Eli approached on foot under cover of darkness, scouting the layout. The town was quiet, peaceful, utterly unaware that its normal routine was about to be shattered. "Tomorrow morning," Ayesha said, "we walk in together, all of us, families first, warriors last. We show them we come in peace." "And if they panic, if they think it is an attack?" Tahoma asked. "That is why Eli goes first," Ayesha said, looking at him. "You go in tonight. You talk to the judge, explain what is happening, make sure he is ready. We need him on the steps of the courthouse when we arrive. We need it to be official." Eli nodded. "I will do it." "If you betray us now," Tahoma said quietly, "I will hunt you to the ends of the earth." "I know." Ayesha placed a hand on Eli's arm. "Be careful. And Eli, thank you." He slipped into town as midnight approached, moving through the shadows until he reached the hotel where the judge was reportedly staying. Getting inside was easy. Getting the judge to listen without calling for help was harder. Judge Horace Whitmore was in his 60s, silver-haired and dignified, and when Eli knocked on his door at 2 a.m, he answered with a derringer in his hand and suspicion in his eyes. "Sir," Eli said quickly, hands raised, "my name is Elijah Carver. I need 5 minutes of your time. It is a matter of life and death." Something in Eli's face must have convinced him, because Whitmore lowered the gun and stepped aside. "Talk fast." Eli told him everything. The silver deposit, Voss's scheme, the Army's orders, the Apache families trying to surrender peacefully. He told him about Ayesha and Tahoma, about Neshoba and Kale, about children who had never held a weapon being hunted like animals. When he finished, Whitmore sat down heavily in a chair. "You are asking me to involve myself in a military matter. I could be court-martialed." "You are a judge," Eli said. "Your job is to uphold the law. These people have committed no crime. They just want to live. Is that not the most basic right of all?" Whitmore was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "When do they arrive?" "Dawn. They will come to the courthouse. If you are there, if you officially take them into your custody for processing as asylum seekers, the Army cannot touch them without going through you first. It buys time. Time to get lawyers involved, to get newspapers involved, to make this public enough that Voss cannot bury it." "This is going to cause a firestorm," Whitmore said. "Yes, sir." The judge looked at Eli, really looked at him, seeing the exhaustion, the injuries, the desperate hope. "All right," he said finally. "I will be there. But Carver, if this goes wrong, we are both going to hang." "I know, sir. Thank you." Dawn came cold and clear. Eli stood on the courthouse steps with Judge Whitmore watching the eastern horizon. The judge had roused the newspaper editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chase, and the telegraph operator. Both were present witnessing what was about to happen. Then they came. Ayesha led the way, walking tall and proud despite her injuries. Behind her came the families, mothers carrying children, elders, supporting each other, wounded warriors helping those weaker than themselves. Tahoma and the other fighters brought up the rear, their weapons carried openly but pointed at the ground. They walked down the main street of Cedar Springs in the early morning light, and as they came, people emerged from houses and shops staring in shock and fear. Voices rose confused and angry. Someone shouted for the sheriff, but Ayesha did not stop. She walked straight to the courthouse steps, and there in front of Judge Whitmore, Margaret Chase, and the gathering crowd of townspeople, she spoke in clear, careful English. "My name is Ayesha, daughter of Nantan. These are my people. We come not to fight, but to seek justice. We are being hunted by men who want our land for mining. We ask for protection under the law. We ask for the chance to live." Judge Whitmore stepped forward. His voice carried across the square. "As circuit judge for this territory, I hereby take these individuals into protective custody pending a full legal review of their status and the allegations they have made. They will be housed humanely and treated with respect. Any attempt to harm them will be considered an assault on the court itself." The crowd erupted in shouting, some supportive, many angry. But Margaret Chase was writing furiously, and the telegraph operator was already heading to his office to send word to larger newspapers. Eli stood to the side watching it unfold, his heart pounding. They had done it. Against all odds, they had made it. The Apache families were safe, at least for now. Ayesha caught his eye across the crowd. She nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement. Then she turned her attention back to the judge, beginning the long process of explaining their situation in detail. As the sun rose fully over Cedar Springs, bringing light to hidden corners, Eli Carver allowed himself to hope just a little that maybe, just maybe, some things could be made right after all. The courthouse in Cedar Springs had never been designed to hold 53 Apache people. Within hours of their arrival, the building had transformed from a sleepy administrative office into something between a refugee camp and a fortress. Judge Whitmore commandeered the main courtroom, the jury room, and even his own chambers, converting them into temporary housing. The townspeople, divided between fear and curiosity, stood in small clusters on the street, watching through the windows as families settled onto makeshift bedding of donated blankets and hay. Eli stood outside, leaning against a post, his leg wound, throbbing despite Neshoba's treatment. He had not slept in 36 hours, and exhaustion pulled at him like an undertow. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment when Ayesha had walked down that street straight-backed and fearless, leading her people into the uncertain mercy of white man's law. Sheriff Tom Brennan arrived on horseback just after noon, having ridden hard from Copper Ridge when news reached him via telegraph. He dismounted heavily, his face grim, and walked straight to where Eli stood. "Tell me this is not what I think it is," Brennan said. "Depends what you think it is. I think you just threw a lit match into a powder keg, and when it explodes you are going to be standing at ground zero." Brennan removed his hat, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Clayton Voss knows. The Army knows. They are coming, Eli, and they are not coming to talk. Let them come. Judge Whitmore has legal custody. They cannot just—" "Cannot," Brennan laughed bitterly. "Cannot, boy, you have been gone from civilization too long if you think cannot means anything to men like Voss. He has spent too much money, made too many promises. He will burn this town to the ground before he lets those Apache walk free." before Eli could respond, a commotion erupted at the far end of the street. A group of riders, maybe 20 strong, thundered into town. They were not soldiers. These were Voss's hired guns, the same men who had ambushed them on the ridge. Leading them was a thick-necked man with a scarred face who Eli recognized from wanted posters. Jack Hendricks, wanted in 3 territories for murder and worse. The riders pulled up in front of the courthouse, their horses snorting and stamping. Hendricks dismounted with casual arrogance, his hand resting on his pistol, and surveyed the building like a man pricing livestock. Judge Whitmore emerged onto the courthouse steps, Margaret Chase at his side with her notebook ready. "This is a court of law," Whitmore announced, his voice carrying. "State your business or move on." Hendricks spat tobacco juice onto the street. "My business is taking those savages off your hands before they murder everyone in their sleep. These individuals are under the protection of this court. You have no authority here." "I have all the authority I need." Hendricks patted his gun. "Mr. Voss pays my salary, and Mr. Voss wants them gone, so they are going. The easy way or the hard way makes no difference to me. Touch them, and I will have you arrested for contempt of court and interfering with legal proceedings." Hendricks laughed. "Arrest me? You and what army, old man?" The standoff might have turned violent right there, but another group of riders appeared, this time wearing blue uniforms. Captain Reynolds, the same man who had commanded at Black Canyon 5 years before, led a column of 30 cavalry troopers. Eli felt his stomach drop at the sight. Reynolds dismounted and approached the courthouse with military precision. He saluted Whitmore perfunctorily. "Captain Marcus Reynolds, 3rd Cavalry. I have orders to take custody of the Apache hostiles currently harboring in this building." "They are not hostiles," Whitmore said firmly. "They are asylum seekers, and they are under my protection." "With respect, Your Honor, you do not have jurisdiction over military matters. These individuals are wanted for evading relocation orders." "Show me the warrant." Reynolds hesitated. "It is a military order, not a civilian warrant." "Then you have no standing in my court." Whitmore straightened his shoulders. "Captain, these people have made serious allegations of conspiracy and attempted murder. Until I have conducted a proper hearing, they remain in my custody. If you wish to dispute this, you will need to obtain a writ from the territorial governor." "The governor authorized this operation," Reynolds said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. He had not expected legal resistance. Margaret Chase stepped forward, and her pencil moving rapidly across her notepad. "Captain Reynolds, for the record, are you confirming that you intend to remove individuals from legal custody without due process? I am writing for the Arizona Territorial Gazette, and this will be in tomorrow's edition." Reynolds' jaw tightened. The presence of the press changed the equation. Whatever orders he had received, they had likely assumed he would simply take the Apache without witnesses, without complications. "I will need to consult with my superiors," he said finally. "You do that," Whitmore replied. "In the meantime, these people stay where they are." Hendricks stepped forward. "The hell they do. Mr. Voss is not going to—" "Mr. Hendricks," Whitmore interrupted, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "If you complete that sentence, I will hold you in contempt. If you draw that weapon, I will have you shot for threatening a federal judge. And if you think I am bluffing, I invite you to test me." Something in Whitmore's tone made Hendricks pause. He looked at his men, at the soldiers, at the growing crowd of townspeople. The situation was not as simple as he had expected. He spat again, this time closer to Whitmore's feet. "This is not over," he said. "No?" Whitmore agreed. "It is not. Court convenes tomorrow morning at 9. Anyone with testimony regarding the allegations made by these people is welcome to present it. Until then, this building is off limits to everyone except those I authorize." The hired guns withdrew, but they did not leave town. They took over the saloon drinking, and making it clear they were not going anywhere. The soldiers set up camp at the edge of town, close enough to respond quickly if called. As the sun set, Eli found himself in the courtroom, which had been converted into sleeping quarters for the women and children. Ayesha sat in one corner, speaking quietly with Tahoma and the other leaders. When she saw Eli, she gestured him over. "Tomorrow it starts," she said. "The trial." "Not really a trial," Eli said. "More like a hearing to determine if you have grounds for asylum." "What are our chances?" Eli hesitated. "Honestly, I do not know. Whitmore is a good man, but he is one judge in a small town. Voss has money influence and the territorial government in his pocket. So what do? We tell the truth, all of it, and we hope that enough people are listening." Ayasha looked around the room at the children settling down to sleep, the mothers whispering lullabies, the old ones preparing medicines. "If this does not work," she said quietly, "if they come for us anyway, promise me something." "What?" "Get the children out. I do not care what happens to me or to Homa or the warriors. But the children, they do not deserve to die for land they never chose to be born on." "It will not come to that. Promise me." Eli met her eyes. "I promise." She nodded, satisfied, and turned her attention back to the others. But as Eli left the courtroom, he felt the weight of that promise like a stone in his gut. That night, he could not sleep. He walked the perimeter of the courthouse, checking doors and windows, thinking about angles of attack and fields of fire. His old military training never fully buried surfaced like muscle memory. Kane reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a weathered journal. This belonged to Sergeant Hodge. He died 3 months ago. Drink finally got him. But before he died, he wrote this. He handed the journal to Eli. The pages were stained, the handwriting shaky. Eli read by moonlight, "I can't carry it anymore. Black Canyon. The man with the child. Carver didn't shoot. He hesitated. I saw it through my scope. So I took the shot and told him it was his. I got the promotion. He got the guilt. I'm sorry, Eli. I'm a coward." Eli stared at the page, his hands trembling. This proves I didn't kill Nantan." "It does," Kane said. "You could show this to Ayasha. Clear your name." Eli looked at the journal for a long moment. Then, without a word, he walked to a small cooking fire nearby and dropped the journal into the flames. "What are you doing?" Kane grabbed his arm, but it was too late. The pages curled and blackened. "Why would you destroy that?" Kane demanded. "Because it doesn't matter," Eli said quietly. "I still killed 7 other people that day. This journal just shifts the blame from me to a dead man. It doesn't make me innocent. It doesn't bring anyone back." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "This is why I am really here. Orders came down this morning. Governor Ashford has issued an emergency declaration. The Apache in that courthouse are to be removed by force if necessary. Tomorrow, after the hearing, concludes regardless of the outcome. Whitmore will not allow it. Whitmore will not have a choice. They are sending 2 companies, nearly 200 men with orders to shoot anyone who resists. They are calling it suppression of an armed uprising. There is no uprising. There will be. Voss is going to make sure of it." Kane handed Eli the document. "This is a copy of the operational plan. I stole it from Reynolds's tent. Look at Section 3. Eli unfolded the paper, tilting it to catch the moonlight. Section 3 detailed a provocation strategy. Hired guns would start a fire on the edge of town, blame it on the Apache, and use the chaos to justify a military response. "When?" Eli asked. "Tomorrow night. Maybe sooner if things do not go Voss's way in court." "You could stop this. You could testify." Kane shook his head. "I have a family, Eli. A wife, 2 daughters. If I go against orders, they will court-martial me. My family will lose everything. I cannot do it. So you will just let innocent people die. I am giving you this." Kane tapped the document. "That is all I can do. Use it however you can." He turned to leave, then paused. "I am sorry. For Black Canyon, for lying to you, for not being brave enough now, I am sorry for all of it." Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Eli alone with stolen orders and a choice that felt impossible. The hearing began at 9 the next morning. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Townspeople jammed the benches and stood along the walls. Journalists from as far away as San Francisco had arrived overnight, drawn by Margaret Chase's telegraph reports. Soldiers lined one side of the room, Voss's hired guns, the other, both groups watching each other with barely concealed hostility. Judge Whitmore sat behind the bench looking older and more tired than he had the day before. He banged his gavel 3 times. This court is now in session. We are here to determine whether the individuals currently under my protection have legitimate grounds for asylum and whether the allegations they have made regarding conspiracy and attempted murder warrant further investigation. He looked at Ayesha. The petitioners may present their case. Ayesha stood. She had cleaned up as best she could, but there was no hiding what she was: a warrior nearly 6.5 feet tall, scarred and powerful, with eyes that had seen too much death. The courtroom whispered at the sight of her. "My name is Ayesha, daughter of Nantan." She began her English careful and clear. "I speak for my people. We come here not to ask for charity, but to demand justice. For 5 years we have been hunted like animals, our homes burned, our children taken, our land stolen, not because we are criminals, but because we stand in the way of profit." She gestured to Clayton Voss, who sat in the front row in an expensive suit, his face already red with barely suppressed fury. "That man wants us dead, not because we attacked him, not because we stole from him, but because there is silver under our land, and to him silver is worth more than Apache lives." "Lies!" Voss shouted, leaping to his feet. "Your Honor, this savage is spreading slander." Whitmore's gavel came down like a gunshot. "Mr. Voss, you will sit down and remain silent until you are called upon. One more outburst, and I will have you removed from this courtroom." Voss sat his hands clenched into fists. Ayesha continued, "We have witnesses. We have evidence. We ask only that you listen with open minds and hearts." Over the next hour, testimony was given. Tahoma spoke about the hired guns' unprovoked attack on the ridge, describing in detail how they had been fired upon while traveling peacefully, how 2 horses and an elderly man had been killed. His English was rougher than Ayesha's, but his anger was clear and controlled. Neshoba came next, hunched with age, but fierce in her dignity. Through a young woman who translated, she described the conditions at the San Carlos Reservation: water contaminated with alkali that caused dysentery in children, food rations cut repeatedly until families were starving soldiers who confiscated traditional medicines and forbade the practice of healing ceremonies. "My grandson died there," Neshoba said, her voice steady despite her tears. 6 years old. He got sick from the water. The white doctor would not treat him because he said Indian children were not worth the medicine. I held him as he died, and I swore I would never let another child suffer that way if I could prevent it. The courtroom was silent. Even the hired guns looked uncomfortable. A young warrior named Dahana testified about watching his sister die from smallpox, a disease she contracted from a blanket given by Indian Affairs agents as a winter gift. "They knew the blankets were infected," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "A trader told me later they did it on purpose to make us sick, to make us weak." Margaret Chase was writing furiously, her pencil scratching across page after page. Other journalists did the same. This testimony, these stories, they would be in newspapers across the country by week's end. Then Judge Whitmore called Elijah Carver. Eli stood his legs unsteady and walked to the front. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. "State your name and occupation for the record," Whitmore said. "Elijah Carver, former Corporal 3rd Cavalry Sharpshooter Division, currently a blacksmith." A murmur ran through the crowd. A soldier testifying for the Apache. "Mr. Carver, you were present at the engagement known as Black Canyon in the winter of 1878. "Yes, sir." "Describe what you witnessed." Eli took a breath. "We were ordered to intercept a group of Apache who had left the San Carlos Reservation. Our commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, told us intelligence indicated they were a war party, heavily armed and moving to raid settlements in the Salt River Valley." "And what did you find when you located them?" "We found families, Maybe 40 people total, a few warriors with rifles, yes, but mostly women, children, elderly. They were moving slowly because they were carrying sick people en travois. They had almost no supplies. They were not going to raid anyone. They were running away from the reservation because people were dying there. What happened next? Eli's voice dropped. Captain Reynolds gave the order to engage. We opened fire from elevated positions. The Apache tried to flee to get to cover in the canyon, but we had them in a crossfire. It was over in maybe 10 minutes. When the shooting stopped, we counted 31 dead. 23 of them were women or children. The courtroom erupted. People shouted questions, protests, denials. Whitmore hammered his gavel until order was restored. Mr. Carver, you said Captain Reynolds gave the order to fire on women and children. He gave the order to fire on Apache. We followed it. I personally killed 7 people that day. I do not know if they were men, women, or children. I was 300 yards away with a scope. All I saw were targets. Eli's hands were shaking now. After the engagement, we were ordered to burn the bodies to prevent disease. We were told to report that all casualties were combatants. No women, no children, just hostile warriors. That is a damned lie. The shout came from Captain Reynolds himself, who stood among the soldiers. Your Honor, this man is a deserter and a coward. He abandoned his post and has clearly fabricated this story to justify his cowardice. Whitmore pointed his gavel at Reynolds. Captain, you will have your opportunity to testify. Sit down. Reynolds sat, but his face promised murder. Eli continued. After Black Canyon, I could not do it any more. I started having nightmares. My hands started shaking. I could not hold a rifle steady. 3 months later, I deserted during a snowstorm. I have spent the last 5 years trying to forget, trying to drink away the memories, trying to become someone other than the man who killed innocents and called it duty. Why are you testifying now? Because I met Ayesha. I saved her life when she was wounded, and in return, she showed me something I had not seen in 5 years. Mercy. She had every right to kill me, every reason to hate me, but she chose not to. And if she can show that kind of strength, the least I can do is tell the truth no matter what it costs me. He looked directly at Voss. These people are not the enemy. The enemy is greed. The enemy is men who see human beings as obstacles to profit. There is silver under Sleeping Rock Valley, rich deposits worth millions. Mr. Voss knows this. He purchased mineral rights through the Territorial Land Office by claiming the land was uninhabited. But it is not uninhabited. 53 people live there. And Mr. Voss needs them gone before anyone notices they exist. Eli pulled out the document Kane had given him. This is a military operational plan outlining a strategy to provoke violence and blame it on the Apache, giving the Army justification for lethal force. The plan was commissioned and partially funded by Clayton Voss through intermediaries. He handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to Judge Whitmore. The judge read it, his face darkening with each line. Where did you obtain this document? Whitmore asked. From a friend who still has a conscience. Someone in the military who could not live with what was being planned. Voss was on his feet. That document is classified military intelligence. Its very existence here is proof of treason. Your Honor, I demand that Carver be arrested immediately. You demand— Whitmore's voice could have frozen fire. Mr. Voss, you are in my courtroom and you will not make demands. You will, however, take the stand. Bailiff, swear him in. Voss looked like he wanted to refuse, but with dozens of eyes on him, including the journalists, he had no choice. He walked to the witness chair, placed his hand on the Bible with visible reluctance, and swore his oath. Mr. Voss, Whitmore began, you have purchased mineral rights to land in Sleeping Rock Valley. I have. Through completely legal means, I might add. The Territorial Land Office approved the transaction 3 months ago after proper surveys and documentation. Documentation that claimed the land was uninhabited, public domain land, available for purchase, but not uninhabited. Unless you are claiming that the 53 Apache currently in my custody do not exist, they are squatters on public land. They have no legal standing. Under what law? Voss blinked. The Homestead Act clearly states, the Homestead Act applies to settlers who wish to claim land. It says nothing about removing indigenous peoples who were there first. The Apache forfeited their claims when they broke treaty obligations. Which treaty? Be specific. Voss was sweating now. The general treaties governing the territory. There is no such thing as a general treaty, Mr. Voss. Either you can name a specific treaty that the individuals in this courtroom violated, or you are admitting you have no legal basis for your claim. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo granted the United States sovereignty over the territory but said nothing about removing Apache from ancestral lands. Try again. Voss's face was turning purple. Your Honor, with respect, you are not an expert in Indian affairs law, but I am an expert in evidence, and I am looking at a document that suggests you paid to have innocent people killed to facilitate a business transaction. Did you or did you not hire Jack Hendricks and his men to remove Apache from Sleeping Rock Valley by force? I hired security to protect my investment, from families, from children, from a medicine woman in her 70s, from hostiles who have been raiding settlements for months. What settlements? Name one. Voss opened his mouth, closed it. The reports are in the territorial governor's office. I have those reports here. Whitmore lifted a folder. Courtesy of the telegraph office. There have been no Apache raids in this territory for 6 months. The last reported incident was a theft of 3 horses, and the accused Apache was later found to be a white man disguised to deflect blame. So, I ask you again, Mr. Voss, what threat did these people pose that justified hiring armed mercenaries? They were in my way, Voss shouted, finally losing control. Do you understand what you are doing? That silver deposit could transform this territory. It could bring railroads, factories, jobs for thousands of people. But none of that can happen while a band of savages squats on top of it, living like animals, contributing nothing to civilization. So their lives are worth less than your profits. Their lives are worth exactly what the market determines. This is America, Your Honor. We believe in progress, in development, in the future. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. Sometimes you have to clear away the old to make room for the new. That is how civilization works. The courtroom had gone silent. Every word Voss spoke was being recorded by half a dozen journalists. Whitmore leaned forward. Mr. Voss, you have just confessed under oath and before witnesses that you believe indigenous peoples have no right to their ancestral lands if those lands contain valuable resources. You have admitted that you hired armed men to force them out, and you have essentially argued that murder is acceptable if the economic benefits are sufficient. Do you understand what you have done? Voss seemed to realize finally that he had gone too far. I misspoke. I did not mean. You meant exactly what you said. Your tone, your choice of words, the passion with which you delivered them, all indicate sincere belief. Whitmore's expression was granite. You are dismissed from the stand. Do not leave town. As Voss stumbled back to his seat, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Journalists rushed for the doors, racing to file their stories. Townspeople argued loudly, some still supporting Voss, others shocked by his naked admission of intent. Whitmore hammered his gavel repeatedly. Order, I will have order. When the room finally quieted, he continued, This court is in recess for 1 hour. When we reconvene, I will hear from any other witnesses who wish to testify. Specifically, I would like to hear from Captain Reynolds regarding the events at Black Canyon. Reynolds stood. Your Honor, I must protest. Military operations are not subject to civilian judicial review. Captain, when military operations result in the deaths of civilians, they absolutely are subject to review. You will testify or I will issue a warrant for your arrest on charges of obstruction of justice. Reynolds's face went white. You do not have the authority. Try me. The recess was a maelstrom of activity. Journalists cornered anyone willing to talk. Townspeople divided into angry camps, some demanding the Apache be released immediately, others insisting they be handed over to the army. Voss's hired guns gathered in a tight knot, their hands near their weapons, clearly discussing their next move. Eli found Ayesha in the jury room where the Apache had been waiting. She was standing at the window, watching the chaos outside. "It is going well," Eli said. Voss buried himself up there. "Words in a courtroom," Ayesha replied. "Will they stop bullets? They might. Once this gets out, once newspapers across the country run the story, there will be pressure on the territorial governor to act. Voss will not be able to just murder you and cover it up. You have a lot of faith in words. I have faith in witnesses, in people like Margaret Chase who will not let this be buried." Ayesha turned to face him. "Eli, if this does not work, if they come for us tonight, we will get the children out. I promised you that." "I know, but that is not what I wanted to say." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "I wanted to say thank you. Not for saving my life in the canyon, though I am grateful for that. Thank you for showing me that not all white men are monsters. Thank you for giving me hope that maybe someday our peoples can look at each other and see humans instead of enemies." Eli felt something crack open in his chest. "Ayesha, The door burst open. Tahoma rushed in, his face urgent. "Soldiers are moving. They are forming up in the street, weapons ready." Eli ran to the window. Tahoma was right. Reynolds had gathered his 30 men, and they were arranging themselves in a skirmish line facing the courthouse. Hendricks and his hired guns were doing the same on the other side. The courthouse was surrounded. "They are not waiting for the court to reconvene," Ayesha said. "They are going to attack now." A single rifle shot cracked through the air, then another. Someone was shooting from the rooftops, though Eli could not see who. The crowd scattered, screaming, running for cover. "It is the provocation," Eli said. "They are staging it now, making it look like you fired first." More shots rang out. A window shattered. Women screamed, pulling children away from the glass. "To the basement," Ayesha commanded. "Everyone now." But before they could move, the front door splintered inward. Hendricks and 5 of his men burst into the courthouse, guns drawn. "Nobody moves," Hendricks shouted. "You are all under arrest for instigating violence." He did not finish. Tahoma threw a chair that caught Hendricks in the chest, sending him sprawling. 2 of the hired guns fired, but in the confined space the bullets went wild. Eli tackled one of them, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, sending him down hard. Chaos erupted. Warriors fought with hired guns in brutal close-quarters combat. The women shepherded children toward the basement stairs. Eli grabbed a fallen rifle and used it as a club, not trusting his shaking hands to shoot straight. Outside, the soldiers were advancing. In seconds, they would breach the building, and when they did, the Apache would be trapped between 2 forces with nowhere to run. Then a voice, amplified and commanding, cut through the chaos. "Stop, everyone, stop where you are." A figure appeared in the doorway. An old man in priestly robes, his white hair stark against black clothing. He carried no weapon, only a Bible held high above his head. "I am Father Gabriel Ortiz," the man announced in Spanish, accented English. "I am a witness to the innocence of these people, and I will not allow this travesty to continue." Hendricks, back on his feet and bleeding from a split lip, pointed his gun at the priest. "Get out of the way, old man, or I will drop you where you stand. Then drop me." Father Ortiz stepped fully into the courthouse, his arms spread wide. "But know that if you do, the Catholic Church will demand a full investigation. The Archbishop of Santa Fe is my personal friend. Kill me, and this becomes an international incident." Hendricks hesitated. Behind Father Ortiz, more figures appeared. A dozen townspeople, men and women, both all unarmed, all stepping between the hired guns and the Apache. "We are witnesses too," one woman said. She was middle-aged, plain, with work-roughened hands. "I am Sarah Fletcher. I run the boarding house on 3rd Street. These people have done nothing wrong, and I will not stand by while they are murdered in a church court." Others joined her, forming a human shield. The hired guns looked uncertain now, their simple mission of violence complicated by the presence of civilians who might actually fight back. Judge Whitmore appeared at the top of the stairs, looking disheveled but determined. "Hendricks, you and your men will drop your weapons and submit to arrest, or I will declare you outlaws and authorize deadly force against you." You cannot do that. I just did. Sheriff Brennan deputized every able-bodied man in this town. Anyone who wants to protect these people, you have legal authority to do so with lethal force if necessary. Brennan, who had been watching from the street, stepped forward. You heard the judge. Any man or woman willing to stand up, I am swearing you in right now. To Eli's amazement, dozens of townspeople stepped forward. Not all of them, maybe not even half, but enough. Enough to make it clear that a massacre here would not go unopposed. Hendricks looked around, saw the odds shifting, and slowly lowered his gun. "This is not over," he said. "No," Whitmore agreed. "It is not, because you are under arrest. Sheriff, take him into custody." As Brennan and his new deputies moved to disarm the hired guns, Captain Reynolds appeared, his face a mask of cold fury. "Your Honor, I must protest in the strongest possible terms. You are interfering with a military operation." "What military operation, Captain?" Father Ortiz stepped forward. "The operation to murder unarmed families, because that is what this was. I know. I was at the reservation 2 weeks ago. I saw the Apache preparing to flee. I helped them. I gave them maps, supplies, and I prayed for their safety." Reynolds stared at him. "You helped them escape. I helped them survive. As is my sacred duty." Father Ortiz turned to Judge Whitmore. "Your Honor, I wish to testify. I have information directly relevant to this case." Whitmore nodded slowly. "The court recognizes Father Gabriel Ortiz. Please proceed." The courtroom reassembled this time with armed townspeople lining the walls, a clear message that any further violence would be met with resistance. Father Ortiz took the stand, placed his hand on the Bible he had carried in, and swore his oath. "Father Ortiz," Whitmore began, "you stated that you helped the Apache in this courtroom escape from the San Carlos Reservation. Can you elaborate?" "I can. I have served as a missionary in Apache territory for 30 years. I speak their language. I know their customs. 2 months ago, I visited San Carlos to minister to the people there. What I found was not a reservation, but a death camp." The courtroom stirred. Father Ortiz continued, his voice steady, but filled with quiet rage. Children were dying from preventable diseases because the Indian Affairs agent refused to release medical supplies. Food rations were being sold to local ranchers for profit, leaving the Apache with half of what they were promised by treaty. Water sources were contaminated, and when I reported this to the agent, he told me that Apache deaths were an acceptable cost of relocation. "Do you have proof of these allegations?" "I have letters, receipts, and testimonies from 3 other missionaries who witnessed the same conditions. I also have this." He pulled out a ledger from within his robes. "This is a copy of the agent's financial records, which I obtained from a clerk with a conscience. It shows systematic theft of supplies intended for the Apache, with profits being shared between the agent and certain territorial officials." Whitmore took the ledger, examined it, and his face hardened. "This implicates the territorial governor's office." "It does. Which is why I chose to help these people escape rather than report through official channels. I knew my reports would be buried." Father Ortiz looked at Ayasha. "When they came to me in the night, starving and desperate, I gave them what I could, and I told them to run, to find a place where they might have a chance at justice. I told them to find you, Judge Whitmore, because I knew you to be a man of integrity." Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Father Ortiz, your testimony creates a significant problem. If what you say is true, and I have no reason to doubt you, then the persecution of these people goes far beyond Clayton Voss. It implicates the territorial administration itself." "That is correct. Which means this is no longer a simple asylum case. This is potentially a criminal conspiracy involving multiple territorial officials." "Also correct." Whitmore rubbed his face suddenly, looking every one of his 65 years. "I need to consult with colleagues. Father Ortiz, thank you for your courage in coming forward. This court is in recess until tomorrow morning." That night, Eli sat on the courthouse steps watching the stars emerge. The building was now guarded by deputized townspeople, a rotating watch that ensured no surprise attacks. Inside, the Apache slept fitfully, children curled against mothers, warriors taking turns on watch. Ayesha emerged from the building and sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. "Father Ortiz saved us today," she said finally. "He bought us time. But time for what? Even if Whitmore rules in your favor, Voss and the governor will not just accept it. They have too much invested." "So what happens now?" Eli thought about the question. What did happen now? They had won a battle, maybe, but the war was far from over. "We make them too expensive to kill," he said. That is what today was about. Every person who witnessed Voss's confession, every journalist who writes about this, every priest who testifies, they all make it harder to just make you disappear. We make your story so public, so widespread, that silencing you becomes politically impossible. You think that will work? I think it is our only chance. Ayesha looked at him, her face soft in the starlight. "Eli Carver, when this is over, when my people are safe, what will you do? I have not thought that far ahead. Think about it now." He met her eyes. "I suppose I will go back to Copper Ridge, back to the forge, try to be a better man than I was, alone." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Eli's heart hammered. "I do not know. Why do you ask? Because when I look at you, I do not see the soldier who killed my people. I see the man who risked everything to save them. I see someone who carries his guilt like armor, but still has room in his heart for hope." She paused. "I see someone I could spend my life with if he would have me." Eli's breath caught. "Ayesha, I am a broken man. My hands shake. I have nightmares. I carry enough ghosts to haunt a graveyard." "So do I," she said simply. "Maybe broken people are the only ones who can understand each other. Your people would never accept. My people will accept what I choose. And I choose you, Eli Carver, if you will have me." He looked at this woman, this giant among her people, this warrior who had every reason to hate him, but chose mercy instead. He thought about the cabin he could build somewhere on the border between worlds. He thought about mornings waking up to her beside him, about teaching children, both Apache and white, that there was another way to live. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I will have you." She smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look young and unburdened. Then she leaned in and kissed him, gentle, despite her strength, and Eli felt something he had not felt in 5 years: peace. The next morning, Judge Whitmore announced his decision. The courtroom was packed not just with locals, but with journalists from a dozen major newspapers, photographers with their bulky cameras, and even a representative from the Department of Interior who had arrived overnight by emergency rail. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, Whitmore began, "I find that the Apache people currently under my protection have legitimate grounds for asylum. Furthermore, I find compelling evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving Clayton Voss, elements of the territorial government, and certain military personnel to commit murder and fraud for financial gain." The courtroom erupted. Whitmore hammered his gavel. "I am therefore issuing the following orders. First, Clayton Voss is to be held without bail pending a full criminal investigation. Second, I am requesting that the Department of Interior conduct an immediate audit of the San Carlos Reservation and the Territorial Land Office. Third, the Apache families under my protection are granted provisional asylum pending resolution of their land claims through proper legal channels." Voss lunged to his feet. "You cannot do this. I have friends in Washington. You have nothing, Mr. Voss, except a very good chance of spending the rest of your life in prison." Whitmore's gaze shifted to Captain Reynolds. "Captain, I am also recommending that the Army conduct an investigation into the events at Black Canyon and any other engagements where civilian casualties were misreported. You are dismissed from this courtroom and ordered to report to your commanding officer immediately." Reynolds saluted stiffly, his face ashen, and walked out. As the courtroom emptied, Eli felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Sheriff Brennan, a slight smile on his weathered face. "You did it," Brennan said. I did not think you could, but you did. We did it, Eli corrected. All of us. What now? Now. Eli looked at Ayesha, who was surrounded by her people, all of them crying with relief and joy. Now we figure out how to live. In the weeks that followed the trial, justice moved slowly but surely. Captain Reynolds was court-martialed for falsifying reports. He was dishonorably discharged and sentenced to 5 years in military prison. Jack Hendricks and his men were tried for attempted murder. Most received 10 to 20 years. Hendricks himself got life without parole. The silver deposit under Sleeping Rock Valley remained untouched. The Department of Interior, under pressure from public outcry, designated the land as protected Apache territory. Mining was forbidden. Voss's empire crumbled. His wife divorced him. His business partners abandoned him. He would die in prison 7 years later, a forgotten man. But that was all still to come. For now, 1 year later. The cabin sat on a ridge overlooking the valley, positioned precisely on the boundary between Sleeping Rock Apache land and the territory open to settlement. It was built half in the Apache style and half in the white settler style, a physical representation of the two worlds it bridged. Eli stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, his hands steady as they gripped a cup of coffee. Beside him, Ayesha sat in a rocking chair he had built for her hands resting on her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, she was even more magnificent than before, carrying their child with the same fierce grace she brought to everything. "Do you think it will be tall like me or short like you?" she asked the teasing gentle. "I am hoping for somewhere in between," Eli replied. "Tall enough to reach high shelves, but short enough to fit through doorways without ducking." She laughed, and the sound made his heart full. In the valley below, smoke rose from the Apache camp. They had stayed in Sleeping Rock after the court case, protected now by federal decree. The silver was still there untouched. Voss was in prison awaiting trial, his empire dismantled. The territorial governor had resigned in disgrace, and slowly, carefully, the Apache were beginning to rebuild lives that did not involve constant running. Father Ortiz visited once a month, bringing supplies and news. Margaret Chase's articles had sparked a nationwide conversation about Indian affairs. Reform was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was happening. Tahoma rode up the trail as the sun touched the horizon. He dismounted, tied his horse, and climbed the porch steps. He had never fully warmed to Eli, but there was respect there, now hard-won and genuine. "The council wants you to speak tomorrow," Tahoma said, "about the new school." Eli and Ayesha were building a school, a place where Apache and white children could learn together. It was controversial on both sides, but they were determined. "I will be there," Eli said. Tahoma nodded, started to leave, then paused. "My sister chose well," he said, not looking at Eli. "You are not the man you were." "No," Eli agreed. "I am not." After Tahoma left, Eli and Ayesha sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Somewhere in the valley a child laughed. Somewhere else a fire was lit against the cold. "Are you happy?" Ayesha asked. Eli thought about the question. Was he happy? He still had nightmares sometimes. His hands still shook when he was tired. He still carried the weight of 7 deaths and 1,000 regrets. But he also had a home, a wife, a child coming, and a purpose that felt larger than his own guilt. "Yes," he said, "I think I am." "Good," Ayesha said. She reached out and took his hand, her calloused palm warm against his. "Because this is only the beginning. Our child will be born into a world we are building together, a world where Apache and white can look at each other and see possibility instead of threat. It will not be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is." Eli squeezed her hand. "No, it is not." They sat together as night fell, two people from different worlds who had found a way to build a third world, one that belonged to both and neither. Below them, the valley lights flickered like earthbound stars, each one a small victory against the darkness. And in the distance, soft on the wind, came the sound of drums from the Apache camp mixing with a fiddle from a settler's cabin, the two rhythms finding harmony where before there had been only silence and gunfire. The future was uncertain, threats remained, old hatreds died hard. But on this porch in this moment, with Ayesha beside him and their child moving in her womb, Eli Carver allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption was not about erasing the past. It was about having the courage to build something better in the present. And as the first star appeared in the darkening sky, he made a silent promise to his unborn child. You will know both your mother's stories and your father's. You will walk in two worlds with pride. And you will never have to choose between them, because we will teach you that being both is not a weakness. It is the only way forward.